Good afternoon. It's Joyful Christian Mystic Hermit. I'm going to talk a little bit about evil on this. The Universal Church today, or at least the Roman Rite, is celebrating Epiphany on Sunday. The Sunday closest to the 6th of January, because the 6th of January is officially Epiphany, celebrated. To celebrate the wise men coming to see the light of the world, to celebrate the light of the world, who's Christ. And I was just barely Catholic and loving it that they stood for things. They stood for this, they stood for that. They made statements, they stood for aspects of the gospel and didn't waver on it. And yes, some people didn't like it and would think, oh, how terrible, but they stood for something. The Catholic Church stood for things, and they celebrated. And then it was within just a few months, they changed all these feast days to Sundays rather than the actual day. And I was so disappointed. It isn't evil, I suppose, but it's a breakdown of lowering expectations of adults to be able to come to Mass on those days, even though it was a weekday. They would have Masses at 6 in the morning, 8 in the morning, 7 in the evening, 5 in the evening. They would accommodate for people working, people busy, families. The mother could come at one point in time while the dad could watch the kids, or vice versa, or all come together at 5 or at 7, depending on if they had infants. They could come at 5, or get up early and go at 8 in the morning, or 6 in the morning. A working man could, or a working woman. But they changed Epiphany, which is the 6th of January, to the Sunday closest to it. And they changed the Feast of the Assumption to the Sunday closest to the 15th of August. They took out the beheading, or not the beheading of, but the birthday of John the Baptist, June 24th. They had already taken out the Queenship of Mary on August 22nd. I don't know what else they changed, if you can't expect adults to be able to go to Mass on a weekday now and then, it just lower having all those ridiculous courses in education and how to motivate and all that. That's not motivating people. That's essentially saying you're incapable of showing up on a weekday now and then. What was it, maybe 4 or 5 times a year? I was so disappointed. I thought, don't give down, don't break down. But they did. They changed these. I don't celebrate Epiphany today. So I'm going to talk about evil today, not light. But in essence, I'm talking about light. Here comes the sun, first time today. God is saying, oh, lighten up, you old lady. Lighten up, it's okay. Celebrate it both days. So I'll celebrate it today. Plus on Tuesday. When is it's the 4th, so it'll be Tuesday. Will be Epiphany officially. And not even, and I'm not that much of a traditionalist. I just think, don't lower expectations on us. We're capable. Raise the expectations. That's the problem. People get stuck in the temporal that way, and they don't enjoy conversations with God. They never come to understand that the devil is real, and he's constantly battling against the good in us, God in us. The devil knows that the Trinity dwells within us. And the devil is a fallen angel, Lucifer, and his herd, his ilk, his buddies that fell with him, that, did not want to be, Lucifer wanted to be as God. So he resented that he wasn't. So he took a wrong turn, a terrible path, and but we can do more. We can lift ourselves up ourselves. So I'm going to talk about evil today because we need to know. We need to know these things. When I was a Protestant and God started to really open me up, it was after the divorce, or maybe not the divorce. The divorce hadn't happened yet, but the husband had left, and God started opening me up to the spiritual realm because I kept calling out to God. I needed help. I needed help. I needed help. And I had gotten wooed by a group, a New Age group, and God really warned me firmly. Follow no one, follow no one, follow no one. 3 a.m. And I knew who he was talking about, the group of people that had, tempted me to get involved in their New Age stuff. And I'm not saying anything other than God told me no. Have absolutely nothing to do with New Age. And if you do, if you're looking for the spiritual and you go there, you're not going to find it in the church, in Christianity. And it's there. The spiritual, the numinous, the supernatural is in the church, in Christianity. Don't stop short. Don't stop at the temporal. Keep growing, growing, growing. So I'm going to start out with this poem. I've talked about it. And I wrote this back in 1994. October 14th. It was a Sunday. I had been to this church, this Protestant church. It was one that I'd left my church of childhood. I'd moved back to the Midwest and thought, I'll just go back to the Methodist church I grew up in. I'll be accepted there. Well, they hadn't grown far in Scripture. The adult Bible study class was at a very literal level, and I'd grown beyond that. The Lutheran church I'd come from, we had deeper Bible studies. We'd gotten beneath the surface into the Scriptures. And so that was boring. And then I would bring up comments, but other people weren't there. So I would have to be very, very careful. And the more tense I am, trying to be extra careful what I say or something, that just makes the pain worse because you're tense up more, you're on guard more. And so that was difficult. And then I would hear people say things, and I would, of course, think, oh, but it's more, it's more. And like you guys do when I'm talking, who are beyond me, you're like into the computer, oh, no, it's more, because you're further than me. See, it can get frustrating. So, but at least on something like this, you can click me off and hopefully find something else online that's further. Or you do your own that's further. For people who are further, who grasp at deeper and deeper levels and beyond and beyond. The word within the word within the word, like Gray Rocking said. So I went to this other church then. It was really hard to do because people from my childhood had taken me in. I'd come back with my 3 children, a grass widow, in pain, disabled, and they had taken me in, and in a small town to change a church was sort of a big thing. So, especially from one Protestant church where all your family and friends had gone for 2 or 3 generations that I could trace back. So my great uncle even had a stained glass window in the church, in the sanctuary part, with his name under it, donated by or something. It was Jesus the Good Shepherd window. And so I went to this other church because it was connected with the local college, which later became a little university, still the same size, small, but they had enough coursework and degrees and things that they could qualify as a university then later on. But I went to the church that was linked with that, and I thought, well, there'll be college professors and their wives there, or college professors and their husbands there. And they were, and they had this adult Sunday school that was a Bible study. So it was more in depth and everything. I was growing, learning some things. Um, there was the head of the theology department at the college there, and others who were, and then they had an evening Bible study I got invited to, even a couples one, but they invited the single lady. So I went, and I knew some of the other women from a prayer breakfast group I went to now and then, of older women. They were elderly women, so I knew some of them, and it was very lovely. And they also had a women's group on Tuesday mornings that if I felt well enough I would go to. But that would sort of go. They would read other books, and I'd read the books, like C.S. Lewis and stuff. I'd been through all those books. So for the sitting involved, I'd lay on the floor, but I just decided that was too much. But it got to the point where in the adult Bible study on Sunday mornings, the adult Sunday school, I would make comments and I wouldn't realize that I didn't realize then that I was so different. I mean, I knew I was different, but I didn't realize other people could pick it out. But these people were like, whoa, I C.S. Lewis essentially talks about purgatory. And I had been doing other reading, Catholic reading and other, in fact, it was the assistant minister in that church that before I went there, he introduced me to the sisters at the convent because, or maybe I'd started going there. And somebody had told me, well, he would know what this word meant. I'd wakened up and had a big word spelled across it in white block letters, a mortification, and I didn't understand what that would mean. So he said he didn't really know, but he figured the sisters would know. And his wife was a nurse in their health care center of the convent. So he was familiar with them through his wife and thought the sisters would surely know. And he was right. And later he admitted to me, he wished he could be Catholic. He really admired from little bits that his wife would come home and talk about of these sisters in the healthcare. But he said he couldn't because his job, he would be ruined in the Protestant world as an assistant minister if he became Catholic. At the time, I didn't understand. I thought, well, what's the big deal? But oh my goodness, I thought that my family, my parents and my grandparents, that was just us. I didn't realize how widespread is the Protestant versus Catholic thing until a little bit later, till I became Catholic. But so I had said something, and this poem I wrote while I wrote this poem on the October 14th of 1994. I had been to the Sunday school of this United Brethren church after having shared the possibility of vicarious suffering to a member of my church, and sensing her cutting down my branches and tearing my roots, quickly changed the subject to mundanities, a subtle form of persecution, being devalued and labeled, experiencing another's withdrawal and walling off, remnant of my self-ego to be bothered thus. I realized that I was being cut off because of whatever it was that I had said that seemed strange to this woman. But then, after I wrote the poem, I did realize that I shouldn't be bothered by being different or whatever it was that I said. I needed to lighten up, but I wrote this poem anyway, No Room. And after I wrote it, maybe a couple months or 4 months later, I showed it to the minister of that church because he started staring at me oddly. And it wasn't for anything, he was very staid and had 4 kids and a wife. It wasn't anything goofy with me, being a single woman with children. But it had to do, he found myself weird. And somebody in the Sunday school, some of the women, had told him that I was, odd and not in keeping with Christianity. So I wrote this poem, No Room. There is no room for a mystic these days, no room at all. Standing in temple hall, pain scuttling through body, too soon words misunderstood fall. Mention experience, encounter with God, a spiritual reality of soulful ecstasy. Others bristle, form unspoken judgment, sow frozen seed of lost opportunity. Unaccepted once more. Learn lonely lesson of silence. Can't stop screaming sighs, yearning for love of my heart, lamb's belly breath, burgeoning womb, beloved groom. Can't they see with inner eye, silver flash, or hear the tinkling bell of signal grace, or feel the flames of pure desire for Christ-wed unity? There is no room for a mystic these days, no room at all. Too strange an oddity, spurned as heretical. Dear God, they doubt my Christianity. And that was where I left it. Eventually, several months later, when it was just getting worse and worse, I showed this poem to the minister. And at this time, I didn't know I hadn't been labeled a mystic yet. I hadn't been to a priest. Oh, wait, had I? No, I hadn't even visited a priest yet. This was in 1994. This was half a year before I finally had the nerve to go see a priest who immediately said, oh, you're a mystic, and you're welcome here. The church is filled with mystics. Yeah. Well, a lot of dead ones. And there are some out and about. Some of you are. This is the first time I've met them, through this vlog, where some of you have come and you leave comments, and it's been great. You just don't feel so alone or so odd. But I hadn't met Annie in person. Now, I suspect that this Roxy LaForge from my childhood was. She'd been a missionary, and she was in China and Philippines all of her life. But she came back in her elderly years and was very, very into the Bible, but her eyes, they just sparkled in this. I don't know. When I was a little girl, I just thought, wow, she's got it. She's so close to God and everything. I might have been like 8 or 9. That's when I thought, oh, I want to be a missionary in Africa. And but it's this just expresses it. And the people in the Methodist church who loved me so much and were upset that I left. But my mother came back and she tried to explain to them. Bless my mother's heart. She said, well, she's been away and she's done a lot of studying of the Bible, and so she's just not there anymore. She sort of has grown and studied more and has moved on to sort of another place and is trying in the divorce, and she's trying to find herself, So thank God for my mother, easing it out with my Methodist friends, who I loved dearly and still do. And it was terrible then when I did become Catholic. That's part of the reason why I waited so long too, was just I didn't want to hurt people. by doing that. They wouldn't understand, and they didn't. A lot of them didn't. They cried, and my dad cried. I mean, I'd never seen my dad cry. I even heard that he cried at a restaurant out in Arizona when the Indiana friends went out there and were having dinner with them, staying with them, visiting them, my parents, the elderly ones from the Methodist church. And they later, this one told me she was sort of like my second mother, a English teacher I had my junior year, who I loved dearly, and Juanita. And she'd been a good friend of my mother's, a little bit older than my mother, and died after my mother, quite a bit after. But she told me later, oh, your dad just cried when we were eating out and said, oh, she's become a Catholic, just broke his heart. And oh my goodness, he understands now. He's so proud of me now. I've seen him, he's seen me, he's so pleased. He gets it. But it was hard. So I don't know how I got this mystic, because it was the priest, the first priest 6 months later, who said, well, you are a mystic. So but it was there. I read it or something, probably. Maybe Thomas Merton had mentioned it, or I don't know, in something I'd read. So or it just popped in, because this was a poem that just poured out too. The Angels and Teapots, I worked with some of the phrases more. So that was more me inspired by God. But this came from God with me writing it down. I didn't have to do revisions or anything like that. So how does this relate? The devil can work on us. When I wrote down here, remnant of my self-ego, to be bothered by how people were reacting. See, that's the devil. If we get too much of self in us, that we think, oh my, everybody's watching me, or look at me, I'm this or I'm that. If you're with God, He will keep you right where you need to be. Nothing to His all. A nothing to His all. And He gives you means of being nothing, and of having your mind not thinking, like all this suffering, that tends to take the wind out of your sails. To have all this constant pain, for example, that gets worse and worse. So, and to have people belittle, or to think you're odd when my parents had socialized me. I love people. I love people of all faiths. And there I was, being stigmatized with that I was a weirdo or new age or like the minister. Oh, he looked at me and he read this and he goes, oh, this is awful. He says, you'd better stay out of new age stuff. And then when I went to tell him, it was 6 months later, less than 6 months later, I went to tell him that I was going to be becoming Catholic. I had decided the end of March, as soon as I I went to the first Mass. I think it was Easter was early that year. It was a Palm Sunday Mass. And wow, and my son wanted to go with me. My daughter stayed at the United Brethren Church. I just couldn't take it anymore. He was talking about soccer again and complaining about people playing on Sunday and not coming to church. Well, see, the Catholics handle it. They just have masses all weekend, so you can fit it in around your kids' soccer. All these kids in the Catholic families, They accommodate. But no, they had them before. They had lots of masses because they have the one church. They don't have all these different churches, denominations. It's one Catholic church. In the small town, there were two parishes. And those started way back from Irish immigrants and German immigrants. The Germans came first. So they had this thing going. Petty. Really, even into the 90s when I was there, the German church thought they were better than the Irish because they were there first. There was this competition going. So, it can get very petty. We're human. And, the self-ego, remnants of our self-ego. And the devil can feed on that. If some people would get nasty with each other. So, that's part of the devil at subtle levels. When we think of evil and the devil, you can't just think, what was that movie? The girl that was possessed, I forget, The Exorcist. Or they have others now, since then, demonic movies where it's extreme and the priest comes and does exorcisms or horrible things happen or whatever. And it can happen like that, but it's very extreme. It's rare that someone's actually possessed. Very rare. In fact, the diocese I was in didn't have their own exorcist. They had to get one from a major city in the Midwest, from Chicago. They would have to get one in. And they had to, I think, one time, in all the years I was there, they had one incidence. And I know because I asked to be exorcised. When I started having the ecstasies, I got so worried that the devil had control of me and that was what was happening. So, but the bishop, no, he says, we would know, trust us, we would know. And, that's when he said, we did have a case one time and totally different, very demonic, all this other stuff going on too. To actually be possessed takes a lot. It's where you've messed with the devil and you've totally given over to the devil in huge ways, where you worship the devil, where you're really taken up. And we're talking, speak in different languages, do very evil things, violence even, strange occult experiences that can seem the devil will imitate Christ, imitate holy things, but it's always with evil with it, a lot of evil. And it's very twisted and they're taken over. And often the person has some kind of an illness, comes in on an illness. Well, see, I thought, well, I'm in pain, came in on my pain. But it can more easily come if someone has an emotional or a mental aberration, even some slight mental or psychological issue, and then moves in. And not to put him down, my ex-husband, he wasn't possessed, not at all, but he had gotten influenced. He would be what you would call oppressed. And even at that, as nasty as he could be, and flip-flop, he could be charming with those he wanted and brutal with those he was after, those he wanted to control. And if he didn't have control, he could get really evil. Even that probably wouldn't be considered an extreme oppression. It was he still had control. He could turn it on and off. And I don't even think he recognized his lies. They became truth to him, all of his lies. But he did a lot of bad things, immoral and cruel and vicious, and his lies themselves had become just part of him. And if you would confront him, he would blow up. You didn't dare confront him with the lies. After a while, I learned not to. It wasn't worth it. It got too dangerous. He'd get violent. and his temper would flip so easily. So, and he had nervous tics then. He was, and his skin became very oily, and like pustules on his back, boils, or not, I don't know if boils, but sort of bad pimples and stuff. And he was in his, how old? Well, no, I guess he was 35 when he left. So beyond teenage acne situations. So I often felt it was the ugliness inside of him trying to come out literally through his skin and showing itself. So, but that would be an example of like a oppression, but not even high level oppression. So uh, don't go around saying, oh, some or think people are possessed. It's rare. It's very rare. Even my neighbor woman back in the Midwest, she was probably possessed, mildly possessed. She was the worst. The one who held me against my will, she was. She spoke various languages. She had other markers of being possessed. A good book to read on the levels of what evil gets into a person is Father Gabriel Amorth, Amorth. He was the lead exorcist for Rome, for the Vatican, and for Rome, all of Rome, for 40 years. He's passed away now. He wrote first the one book, and then he has a follow-up. An Exorcist Tells His Story. That's the title. Very easy to read, captivating, scary, but real, and it's a good thing to read to know, because you may encounter definitely people who are spiritually oppressed by the devil. And on a rare occasion, you may encounter someone who's mildly possessed or even full blown. You just never know. But people who are upset with others, I mean, it can be an evil, an ugliness that goes on with that. So this poem itself has certain things in it that can be not good, to be unaccepted, to be cut off from others, to have others bristle, to not speak to us, to judge us, all of that. That can be an evil that gets into even everyday people who just fall to temptation of the devil. They're not oppressed, they're not possessed, but they have fallen to temptation. The devil has tricks. That's what I was told by Padre Pio. He appeared to me one time and said, beware of the tricks of the devil. And he warned me in this dream, and the next thing I knew, I got tricked. And I fell to a temptation. So that's why I'm sort of talking about evil today on what the church celebrates now as Epiphany, the day of light, of enlightenment, of the wise men coming and meeting the newborn king and coming from afar to worship. And it's a day of light. The Epiphany is meant to be filled with light, the light of Christ. But this would be just the kind of day that evil would want to get into our lives and disrupt in some way. Or if you're growing in your prayer life, there's many instances where you just it's good to be educated in the evil one. Don't spend a lot of time on it, but enough so that you're aware. So you won't get deceived, tricked, duped. because the evil is a reality, and it comes from way back in the Old Testament when the angel of light, well, how do we put it? Lucifer fell from God, from God's grace. Lucifer was an angel, a good angel at one point, but he broke away from God. He wanted to be, did not want to be an angel of light. He wanted to be as God. So he fell from God's favor. And other angels went with Lucifer. Lucifer, decided he was going to try to be as God. And angels do have a lot of power. God gave them a lot of power. But Lucifer altered and became evil. So I had found these old notes. I was surprised. And they were I'm going to find it here, of Matthew. And let me get to the spot. Because it has a lot to do about evil in it. And the devil, according to Jesus. Here had these papers right here and thought I could find it easily. Just a minute. It was all about Jesus' thinking and teaching about evil. Hope I can find it. I may have to just stop this video and get into evil another way. The devil. It was on Jesus's knowledge and teachings on evil. Well, I'm sorry. I'll have to find it. Let me look just a little bit further to see. It's going to be so good. Well, I guess what I'll do is just briefly talk about the some of my own. I'll just share my own knowledge of when I came to understand the reality of evil. And I hate to pick on them. I don't mean to, but really the first evil person I encountered up close and over time was my ex-husband. His behaviors, his lies. I didn't know the extent of his lies, but I encountered little ones, and I counted one time where he really flipped out at a guy in a store and was going to beat him up, threatened up to fight. And he was an elementary teacher at the time, a 4th grade teacher. And I was like, whoa. And I said, wait. It was bizarre. It was a store clerk, a young man, a bagger. And it was over one of the most stupid things. And I thought, this is weird. And I got him calmed down. But that was early on, and I was so in love with him. And I thought, well, and I didn't know men that well. My dad traveled so much, but my dad was such a gentleman. But my mother was the one with the temper. So in a way, I was used to temper, and I thought, well, he's just, it's just a temper thing. Like my mom would have outbursts, but she never, well, we would get pretty extreme at times. She would lose control. So I realized that, but we got outside and I said, oh, please don't ever, don't do that. That was so unnecessary. But what it was is he was trying to be like the big man in front of me. It was so, I was so yuck, yuck, yuck. But then, we went along okay, and he would be at work, and I didn't know what all was going on there. And then he was also in the teachers' union, and he became president of it. And he became very ugly, especially when it was negotiation time. And I found out that he would be gone till real, real late and say, that they were working on this or that. Well, he was having an affair with some teacher at that time. I realized later. But they would call the superintendent at all hours of the night. It was way back in the 70s. Just to exhaust him, keep calling his phone. And we didn't have cell phones then, you couldn't put it on hold. So I think finally the guy probably just took his phone off the hook or something. But nasty stuff. And my mother-in-law at the time worked. She was the superintendent's secretary of this big district in Southern California. And she told her son, just sort of nervously though, which later on I realized she walked around eggshells around her son. She was so proud of him because he moved up the ladder. And she was infatuated with her boy, that kind of thing. She had an older daughter than she had this son. And, but she's, oh, well, that is very nice. None of you guys should be doing that. She didn't pinpoint him. But I figured it was him. Because by then, I knew he had this propensity for ugliness. And the longer I was, and then especially when he started being cruel to me the last couple of years, and I was just keeping it together for the children. To keep the family together. And I kept thinking, well, I was so naive about men, really, or people, I suppose. I was so sheltered back in the Midwest in this lovely little town. And my dad, he was such a gentleman with his 3 daughters and so proud of us and protective and all. And I just thought, well, he'll outgrow this. He's young. He's still like 29 or 30. He'll outgrow. And eventually. And for the most part, he would, be better around me. If we were around other people, he would. Alone, I had to walk on eggshells. I didn't have the injury yet. Just even the accident showed me. Because I was injured, but he's the one that thought he was injured, told me to stay and wait for the police to come and make sure they got the kids arrested for being drunk. Which the police didn't come for like an hour because there was a neighborhood security patrol guy there. But he knew the rich kid's dad probably got a payback, convinced the police not to, convinced them that when they did come, that they hadn't been drinking. And the kid passed. By then he passed the breathalyzer and the walk in straight line. Been over an hour that we waited. But then when I was injured, he was cruel to me. Injured, and he already had been before then. And by then I knew he had had an affair with one person, a PTO president, suspected others, but not as many as ended up being. So, and I realized when he said he didn't want to be married anymore, and he was going to start his new era of honesty. In my mind, I thought, well, this is going to be interesting. Can he even? But I didn't understand disorders then. We didn't have Google, didn't have computers to look up stuff. But he was dark. And this is interesting, when he was a 4th grade teacher, I think it was the 2nd year we were married, or 3rd year. I think we just had a little, one of his students sent home he had drawn a picture. And it was all this, it was of my husband, but as a fourth grader would draw it, but all colored in real heavy with bright orange red. His skin was all, and he was all like his arms out, and his hair was all jagged, and it said evil, and then his last name started with an E. I got my maiden name back at the divorce, which flipped him out too, because he wanted that control, of his, it was just anything would flip him out at that point. But and that's what lost the court case for him. We got to leave California, myself with the 3 children, which is no easy thing for a woman to do unless you have a job that you have to go to, or you're remarried and you have to move back and you have primary custody, which I did by the grace of God. But well, he didn't want them, but he would always fight for things just to fight me because he was evil, and he hated my religious aspects. That finally came out in his last letter to me. He left it when he left for good. He had written this letter. He hated God in me. That's a signal of evil too, of people who even the devil is flirting with. And the devil will start in on people when they give up God, even a little bit. When they stop going to church, when they stop praying, when they stop reading scripture, when they won't use the word prayer anymore. That's why I was alarmed for my daughter. And she did use the word prayer when she wanted prayer for Aiden, but which was a relief that she used the word at least. But when they get and Koine is right. It's why my kids are against me. My son especially, because he turned against God and church in a big way, a vile way. And his wedding was a big mockery of the Catholic Church. His friends put it on, but he, worked with them on it at time. They all thought it was so funny, these 40-year-olds, so immature. But the devil has moved in on somebody like that who would go that far. And he lost his position at NBC. Well, I guess several of them lost it. They did a cutback or something. This is maybe 3 years ago, or 3 years ago, I guess. Because my cousin told me he was no longer with them. He'd gone to CBS. He got a job there. And my daughter said, well, yeah, a bunch of them were let go. But I know he had some of his bosses at his wedding. He would have, at his immediate boss. And if they saw somebody his age do that to a church and make a mockery of his own wedding, to be so vindictive, for any adult, that would ring up, this guy's got some issues. And I thought, at the time when my daughter told me about his wedding, I thought, this is not going to go well for his job. What boss would want someone like that, so immature even, and so insensitive to those there who might have been Catholic or some other religion, that he would make a mockery of religion out of his wedding ceremony, a farce of it, and laughing. They all thought they were so funny, these immature little twits. But see, the devil he'd already moved in on him. Years before, he'd started in. And I found in one of my journals way back that he tore up I had a prayer table in our home, and I would put pictures on the wall behind it. He had all the walls in the house he wanted to put his baseball stuff up, but I read how he'd taken down my things and messed up the prayer table and put baseball things up instead. Just ornery. And that was when he was like 12. And it was before he started begging me if he could become Catholic then. And I shouldn't have let him. He wasn't mature enough, and it wasn't in him. But he became very, very devout all through high school, went to Catholic high school, but lost his faith then at a Catholic university because of a bad book, a dissenting book. So, and he was so devout, and he had a beautiful dream, a vision quest dream that he told me about when he was maybe a junior in high school, that I knew he had a great destiny as a Christian, but the devil got to him. But it had already, when he was young, tried to keep him from good. I recognized that in looking at the journal, that the devil didn't want this young kid. And he did become very devout then. And there would be things that would happen, but I would teach him about the devil and how to counteract. And I knew about the devil even when I was a Protestant, because when I moved into our first little house after my divorce, we started having awful, weird things happen in the house, poltergeists. And I had probably 4 or 5 different kinds of Bibles to compare Bibles, in a box. And I'd opened up that box to get to my books that I was reading and to the Bibles. So that box was open, and there were other boxes then I had opened to try to find the books I was looking for. In the garage, we just moved in. We didn't have a cat, and I didn't know anyone in the neighborhood who did, but somehow a cat had gotten into our garage and pooped just on the Bibles. Out of all these other books and boxes open, just on the Bibles. And then the other freaky things were happening. My eldest daughter, one night I heard this male voice talking to her in her bedroom. She and her sister slept together. It was like 2 or 3 in the morning. And I woke up because I heard this man's voice. But it sounded like from outer space, like an astronaut. It was strange. It was sort of echoey sounding voice from a distance, but in her room, and she was talking back with it. And it freaked me because she had an experience when she was 4 in this nursery school house that was haunted, that we owned, and we had a nursery school behind, and we lived in this old house, this old Grove house. And I would see, like balls of light dart around a corner, or doors would open and shut. And at night, even my husband at the time, we would wake up at night, and the toys that he had tarped, the children's, for the preschool, the toys had tarps over them for the rain or over the weekend. It was a weekend night. I think it was like a Sunday night, actually, because school would be the next morning, and the staff would come, and all the children, for the preschool that we ran on the property site. So we had all these little big wheels and tricycles and wagons and things for children to play with out in this playground area, and swings and stuff. Well, our dog at the time was barking and barking and barking. So, I went to a window and called out, stop barking. He would stop for a little bit, get back to bed. He'd bark again. Finally, the husband got out. He went out there, and he came back freaked out. He says, "You wouldn't believe this, but I saw a tricycle going down with no one on it, but going. A big wheel it was, not a tricycle. It was a big wheel, down to the gate. We had a big gate where the children would come in and out, and we could bring a truck or a car through if we wanted to do cleanup or something, but it was usually the gate for the children and their parents to come to walk their children to the little preschool building behind in this property. It was just right on the edge of Claremont, California, that we owned this preschool and house with it. And so sure enough, though. And then another time with I mentioned it to the director we had, Sandy. And I was talking to her one afternoon and told her about it. Said something's going on here. And in the house, things were happening a lot, increasingly so, because we were thinking of selling it and trying something else. My husband wanted to. Well, see, things were getting ouchy. He was having too many affairs, as it turned out. And he always would have to move on then. So, but I didn't know. That I didn't know. I suspected one affair already. I suspected another one with someone with the teachers union, but wasn't sure, but had buried it. But I was telling Sandy about, the weird things and about the toy going down the drive. And finally, we had to bring the dog in because it just kept barking. Oh, the other thing that happened also, I went out because I could hear that we had a maypole, a big tall pole and a tire with cement with a chain, and the kids could swing around on it. Wouldn't be happen in today's world because it's too dangerous with the big chains, but with the handles on, the kids would swing around. Um, but the chains were swinging around and clanging, hitting each other, and it wasn't windy or anything. So that was freaky, and I already knew that there was a ghost or something in that house, a poltergeist going on. And now I would know more about, it was the devil. It wasn't a ghost, it was a devil. And at that time, I caught my little girl, the eldest who was 4, talking with someone on the stairs. She could see. And I said, "Who are you talking with?" She says, "Her name's Kathy." And she was having a conversation. And that's when she stopped anything to God, didn't want to pray anymore from then on. And when we did get moved, I wanted to get out of there then. So when we did get moved, at nighttime, there'd be this horrible devil stench come out of my little girl. So I made the ex-husband come in with me, and I wasn't Catholic then or anything. I didn't have holy water. Had I had holy water, I would have used it immediately. But I said, "Well, pray the Lord's Prayer over and you pray with me." So he did do that because he was scared. He could smell it. And then the stench on that child stopped from then on, but she never did want to pray or wasn't close to God again. And it's heartbreaking to me still. So evil, the devil. But before that, when we had the little house in the town that we lived in, my children and me in our little house in Fallbrook, California. And the weird things going on in that house, the little house that we'd moved out of the nursery school house, had moved elsewhere, divorce happened, husband was doing all kinds of awful stuff, immoral kinds of stuff, and affairs and things. So cruel, unkind to me, whatever. Hadn't had the accident yet, but I often looked back and thought my husband was a carrier. My husband had a lot of evil in him. So I think that affected. But I was divorcing him then. We had this little house in Fallbrook, and weird things were happening, like the cat got into the garage. Someone's cat. I don't know whose it was. None of the neighbors had cats. But whatever, a cat got in our garage and pooped only on the Bibles in the boxes of books that were opened. So, but I called an aunt who lived in up more by Pomona area, or not in Fallbrook, but north, but still in. She had lived in Laverne and Claremont area before, but had moved out. I'm trying to think of the area that she lived in. Whatever. Anyway, but she told me, she says, "You've got the devil going on there. You've got to do something." So she told me to go to and she wasn't a churchgoer. My aunt wasn't, not regularly. But what she told me to do helped. She said, go to each room and make the sign of the cross. My aunt wasn't Catholic at all. And she said, command the devil out of that room, but also make the sign of the cross and say, "In the name of Jesus Christ, whose blood was shed on the cross." She says you have to say it Jesus Christ, whose blood was shed. Say that. Go to each room in your house, including the bathrooms, and do that. And drive Satan out of there. Drive the devil out. So I did that, and we didn't have more problems that I knew of. Nothing with the kids. But the voice that was in my daughter's room that night, I'm sort of jumping around a little bit of time periods, but because I keep remembering of more experiences with the evil one and demonic occurrences in the house, poltergeists and things like that. But I went in and I said, "Who are you talking to?" And she says, "I don't know who it is, but some man from outer space." And that had been my impression as I was walking down the hall and heard this voice. It sounded like an astronaut. Seriously. And it wasn't, it was just freaky, but it was wrong. You don't want some voice talking to she was 10 or 11 at the time. You don't want that going on. Maybe she was 9 even, in that range. And so that was part of, what I told my aunt also, that it was happening. And things would be moved around. We had one thing later, but I realize now that was the power of pain, because the house was all calmed then. And all of us, even the daughter, though, that didn't want to pray, she would go to church with us. And she later became involved in youth groups and stuff. But she didn't want to offer a prayer herself. And I didn't force it either. I didn't force it. But she would go to church with us and pray along with everyone then. That was okay. And the house situation calmed down. But bad things had happened with her dad. That was a bad thing. And we don't know what it was. But she had like 9 out of 10 markers. And then he got called in, and 2 psychologists, they said they scared him to death, that his career would be toast. And I regret, though, because the sheriff was going to handle the girls, get it out of them what was going on when they would visit their dad. And I regret that I let Dr. H talk me into talking to the girls instead. And he convinced the sheriff, these 2 psychologists did, that they would handle the dad, because Dr. H was worried it would traumatize my eldest too much to have the sheriff. Because the sheriff said, we're going to get it out of it no matter what we've got to do, It sounded a little bit rough. And I was worried at the time it would be too much, because my eldest was not herself anymore. I would pick her up if she would visit but she would be like all curled up in embryo position in the front seat and not speak. And one time she told me something hurt, and that was when she was 8 years old, something I had discussed with her yet, body term. So I called the family doctor. He says, take her to the ER, have her checked. They didn't find anything, but they found coloration, but nothing of penetration. So, but something was going on with him. And even if he would drop them off, these 7-year-old, she was 7, and 8.5-year-old, at a Long Beach, California movie theater by themselves on a Saturday afternoon. He only had the baby, who then would sleep, have his nap in his crib, so he could have women in. He couldn't even go a weekend without sex with these women. And I think that the girls saw something, or she did, that upset her. And overheard the term. So, but the school, she was doing things at school that the school had to call the police and report it, because it wasn't normal for a little girl like that. In the school, it was the Lutheran school, our church's school. They went to for a year. But because of that happening, I had to move them to the public school the next year, so they wouldn't be, the other parents wouldn't not want their kids to come play with my children because of that. So a lot of evil. See, this is how the devil works. See, this is what I'm telling you. In everyday, not just normal everyday, but it can be. And not always just the poltergeist stuff or some voice speaking or things moving in the house or a cat pooping only on the Bibles when there's no cat that you know of. It's odd things happening, upsets at your work, somebody being cruel to you, someone who loses a temper easily, someone who makes oh, my mother, the devil had her. And being as I am, God knew I would see and understand and go to work on it. So God showed me my mother later on in life. She was all red, flaming red hair and red skin, all but a little patch on the right cheek was her beautiful clear skin. My mother had beautiful skin. She had no wrinkles even when she was 86 when she died, 86 and a half. I looked 20 years older than her. And she just had this pure little piece of skin. And this was like when she was 84 that God showed me this, because she'd gotten into the new age, but God showed me to what extent it had gone to shock me into action, big action with her. And the action we used, and I told my sisters, I said, we've got to pray, pray, pray. I took this pilgrimage, which was a big risk for me. I didn't have the money, but the priest paid for it for me, the priest who was running it, because I told him what was going on with my mother and that I just felt that God wanted me to try this pilgrimage over to Rome. We went to like Rome, Florence, and Assisi, and Venice. I said, I've got to go to every church I can and pray for my mother in each church on my knees, on their floor. And if any holy spot in the church, and any place that there were saints, that I would pray for my mother's soul. And we didn't know if I'd even make the trip, what would happen, because of the sitting problem. But I could stand on the plane for the most part. And I did collapse in France in the airport with pain siege. But some stranger brought me a cup of orange juice, and I had BC at that time I could take. I had no pain meds, and I revived. I was able to make it through that without it getting into a full-blown headache pain siege. So I made it on that trip miraculously and prayed everywhere I could for my mother. And then it wasn't long after we got back, she agreed to come back to the Midwest, and then I could just work on her directly through prayers. I had other people praying. I would put holy water on me when I would go to her room. I would use holy water in her room when she wasn't looking that sneaky. But and we had an Easter miracle, because at that point she had gotten so far gone. She would say things, there is no sin, and she no longer believed in Christ. And it was bad. It's bad. But there wasn't anything weird or strange other than, see, that was a vision I'd had of her, a dream vision, where God showed me the extent to which she was taken over by the devil. And I couldn't tell my sisters how I am, and they still don't know. They wouldn't cope with that at all. They're the one especially, very anti-Catholic even, doesn't think it's Christian. So, but I did tell them, that we've just got to pray and pray and pray, that she's overtaken by the devil. And my one sister thought so too, for different reasons. And the eldest sister also. The one sister was so freaked out by the New Age, and the eldest sister didn't like it either. But so we did. We had all our friends praying, but they didn't know I'd gone on this pilgrimage to pray at every church I could. And at the Vatican I did. The whole thing was pray for my mother's soul. And on the side, I prayed for an aunt and her daughter to get along better. The aunt loves her daughter, but the daughter has never loved her mother, and it's still that way. So I still pray for that. But she's doing much better with her mother, at least, much more patient with her and stuff. But it's just things like that. See, the devil is in that situation. Why would a girl at age 4 start disliking her mother? Her mother's lovely. She's got issues just like we all do. My aunt's thing happens to be some vanity. Since she was, I always remember her that way. But she's lovely. She's got a beautiful heart. None of us is perfect. None of us. And the aunt is so lovely and loves her daughter. But her daughter had put on a lot of weight, and my aunt would say things to her, though, not nice to do. You don't. I know it bugged her because to my aunt, the outer appearance means so much to her. So that didn't help any, but my cousin hadn't liked her since she was 4 years old, her mother. And her mother loves her so much. So I think it's coming better. And I know my cousin loves her mother deep down, but has this issue with her since age 4. What caused that issue? It'd have to be the devil. Evil. Things that are inexplicable and not good, it's evil. Forces of evil, they're out there. They're out there. The devil can even get into animals, can use animals. So, I don't know where I was on stuff, but anyway, there's ways to get rid of the devil. Get your house blessed. The island house, I kept having one thing after another not work out there when I was trying to fix it up. And I also heard a woman's voice upstairs screaming one night, "Help me, help me, help me." So I started praying for whatever soul that was. I felt it was the woman who had died in the house, the woman who lived there before me, not the original owners. I was only the third owner in 104 years in that house. The previous had lived there 55 and the other one had lived there 49 years. A Swedish family, the Petersons. They had a boy and a girl and 2 parents. I found things when I would take the drywall off. I would find the old wallpaper they used and paper and different things that they had, notes and stuff. So I found the little boy's little hat from the early 1900s and stuff. So, and the woman's spats. So, but they seemed okay. But was the second family. That was the man was a drinker. So I just prayed and kept going. But there were things in the house that I started writing Jesus with holy water on every window in the house of that farmhouse. I would write Jesus on every one and make the sign of the cross on it. And eventually I got the Russian Orthodox monks up the road to come and bless it. I couldn't get the Catholic priest from the island to come. Well, he thought I was too different for him. So I had to get the Russian Orthodox priest, and he came and he really blessed that house, holy watered it, and I never had another problem with it. But that was the last year I was there. But I had, and it was even, I would have things happen there. Just things that wouldn't go right, that I was trying to work on even, or tools, or workmen come who were bad. But after I got it blessed, Raphael came, who was good. And Mark was good, but he was a fallen away Catholic. But he was so good-hearted, and he had love and holiness in him. And I don't know why he fell away. It wasn't any big issue. So I pray he's gone back. His mom and dad, that's how I found out about him, because I'd gone to the mainland to a parish and met his mom and dad. And his dad said, "Oh, you need to call my son. He's an electrician. He might help you out." Because even the electrical was bad on that house. Of course, the inspector had said it was good. So just in our everyday temporal stuff, the devil will get involved. If you have things not going right in your life, or odd little things, or even not so odd, you're so used to it you don't think it's odd. Or another person who is just dislikes you for some reason, and you can't figure out why. Well, think about evil, that there's something in them that the evil one has. Not even oppressed, it doesn't need to be. Just a little chink hold on the person. Or a problem at work you might have. Some issue with a boss, or with, especially if you are striving in holiness. And the more you do strive on the holy narrow pathway, the more the devil will be roused and try to get at you. Through whatever means. Sickness, pain, stress, odd things not working. All of a sudden you start having money issues or something, or just more money issues than what you would think is normal. Relationship issues, that you didn't have relationship issues before with someone, and it's not that the devil is dealing with them, but just being disruptive. Doesn't mean the devil's in that person, using that person. The devil's just trying to bug you. And St. John Vianney had a very good way. He learned how to deal with the devil. Oh, I didn't even get into this part. I went through a phase after I was Catholic, when I was growing, when the spiritual was opening up to me. And the spiritual had started to open up to me when I had my first house after the divorce, too. I was really getting into the Bible. And dreams were happening. God was guiding me, because I had asked him to help me at night, because I'm too tired. During the day, I've got to work. I've got to take care of the children when I get home, and then I fall asleep. And so just use me in my dreams. Teach me in my dreams. What he started to then. And you bind Satan, though. You bind Satan from your dreams before you go to sleep at night. Say, "Lord, please come to me in the night, if you will, if there's something I need to learn, or whatever you want me to learn." There's always something we need to learn. But as you will, Lord, please teach me in the night, and help me remember, too. But I bind Satan. Help me to bind Satan from my dreams, or from the night. And get your house blessed. If you're Catholic, have a priest come. If you're not Catholic, ask a priest. He might be willing to come. I've read of that. There was somebody back in the Midwest, I think in my home state, that they didn't go to any church, but they had big bad poltergeists in their house. And in fact, I think one of their children was walking up the wall sideways and up across the ceiling. It was freaky. It was in the news article. I read an article about it. And a priest started to come, an exorcist priest from the diocese of the main city of that state, and exorcised the house. It took many times, many exorcisms, but a devil had taken it over, and had also inhabited one of their children. And that's why the child was doing this abnormal things. So it's real, but the worst part of the devil is when they don't do the phenomenal stuff. That's what the devil mostly does. It's just every day little things that you think, oh, it can't be. it can't be. But oh yes, it can, and it usually is. Pray more. Have a rosary. You don't have to be Catholic to have a rosary. Get it blessed. Have a priest bless a rosary. And keep your rosary in bed with you or in your pocket. If you encounter something, make the sign of the cross with the rosary. Give yourself a blessing. Sign of the cross on the forehead. Go into, my cousin has done this. Well, now she can't get around herself, but she'll have a friend. You can get a little bottle, go into a Catholic church and get holy water and use it with faith. She does when things aren't going well, and she senses, and she'll put holy water on herself. Even if she's in a despair or getting into a bad mode emotionally, getting down. She's got a lot of disabilities and is shut in for the most part. And so, she has a husband, but he works, and an adult son who works. But she called the other day and said she was getting down over Christmas. But she pulls through, and she uses holy water, and puts holy water on herself and prays. So that's one way to deal, because she was dealing with the evil one, and not in any big, huge, phenomenal way. So the devil's real, and have things around that will help you. Crucifix is good to have in your home. Like I say, get it blessed. Use holy water. About over a year ago, I did a video of the St. Benedict medal. I have one in each four corner of my house. A blessed Benedictine medal, St. Benedict. It's buried in the corners of the property, front, side, and back, all four, buried, and I prayed the Benedict prayer, St. Benedict prayer, and an Our Father, the Lord's Prayer, and a Hail Mary. So anyone can buy these Benedictine St. Benedict medals. They have a cross on the back and an image of St. Benedict on the front. Get it out of the light for you there. There he is. And it has the four pointed cross. I don't know if you can see that very well. The light is on it. You can find the video, maybe it was about a year and a half. It was in end of May or early June of 2004. Yeah, 2004. Year and a half ago. I did the official prayers of the Benedictine blessing of my property. He helps protect against the evil one. Benedict does in particular. But after I became Catholic, we'll go through some of those things. I started having events in the night, dreams. I would wake up and there would be a huge cat on top of me, giant, in a big clear bowl, a clear ball, and it would be like this inside the ball. I sleep on my back but I didn't have this wedge back then, but I would be flat with my pillow, and this huge ball would be on my chest with a big cat in it, going like this inside the ball. That would be one thing, and it terrorized me. I woke up in a terror. This big black and white cat, huge cat, well, the size of Lovey probably, without the fur though, so he seems smaller. Or between the size of Mercy and Lovey, so in that size range, but larger than a regular house cat. Huge and vicious and, and I'm not really a cat person. I could be now, but back then I wasn't. I was more, we had a cat for a while, but I was more skittish around cats, you know. And this one we had, he would jump out, he loved to play, and he would jump out when you'd come around a corner, sort of scare you. And but I'd gotten used to cats from James. That was his name, was James. But he started spraying in the house because he got spooked in my son's room. So my son at the time, though, was getting ugly acting, getting behavioral and mean, nasty to me. Uh, didn't like church. He'd finally convinced me to let him become Catholic. I think he was maybe like 8th or ninth grade. It would have been probably ninth or 10th grade even. No, ninth grade, 8th grade it was, 8th grade. Because we were in the house and I knew I was going to have to sell it because I was running out of money. And I couldn't have the cat spraying the carpet. I couldn't afford new carpet. It was nice Berber carpet. So I just needed, we had to take him to the humane shelter and somebody adopted him. But he was a great cat. It really upset my son. But he was doing it in his room, ruined the mattress, then went into my eldest daughter's room, ruined that mattress. Never bothered the middle daughters. The middle daughter was very good with God then. But, and that you would think it would be the opposite. But I think was reacting, the cat was reacting, was spooked by the evil, that by the essence of unbelievers in the rooms that were those persons. And my son was being a real little jerk that time, just battling me. And I took it as just part of a boy's growing up and having to have a single mom as the parent. But now I realize it ran deeper than that. Ran deeper. So I suspect now that he inherited his dad's personality, the sociopsychopath. Maybe, I don't know. I can't say for sure, but or else he's hung around with his dad so much since he graduated college. But I haven't heard from him in 3 years, which is okay, because I never knew how he'd be when he'd call on the phone. If he'd be yelling and ranting at me and blaming me and hateful, or decent. So, and he would sound just like his dad used to sound when he would yell at me and stuff. So I suspect, and it can be hereditary, personality orders can be. I hope and pray not. I hope it's that environmental, that he's just hung around his dad that much. Because my grandson has started, at times, he would try to talk like his dad. He's trying to individuate out from his mother and align with his dad. And finally, I didn't say, oh, you sound like your dad, who's a mutterer and not, and very sort of superior, self-righteous guy. And I said, just be yourself, There's nothing better than to be yourself. Talk like yourself, act like yourself. I didn't say a word about his dad. You don't dare, that would have done it. But, and he did, and he started getting back to himself, which I was so grateful because, if somebody is not in a good mode, you don't want the child mimicking it. So, I think I had a lot of my mother's temper after my divorce. I moved into that. I'd heard it, I'd grown up with it, and I had to stop it. I had to just stop that. Because I had no reason to behave like that, other than I was in pain, had no pain meds, and was being harassed by the ex-husband nonstop. I was worn out. But going to temper was not right. So I had to stop it. And so, we all have our stuff. That was probably the devil egging that on in a subtle way, triggering. The devil it's an angel, has all the power of angels, but he's evil. does bad things and resents anyone coming close to God or who has God, and will always try. You'll think, well, I'm very secure in my faith now, and it seems like the devil has let up on me. That's just the time that the devil will try a foothold on you, try to grab. So some of the other things that the devil would do at night, after I became Catholic and was starting to grow, was another time wasn't in a ball, but just a big cat. Another time, and I would wake up just screaming. I was like freaked out, because the devil likes to startle you. The fear effect, catch you unawares, and give you the creeps also. Another time, this was after we'd had to move from the Knights home. My son was in college then, and it's really one of the more overt things to me personally. I mean, as far as, not personally, but as far as nighttime tricks, just sat on me. And I couldn't move. I couldn't see, but it was a big force sitting, pressing down on me. I couldn't get up at all. And I couldn't even move. I couldn't move my arms either. I had my rosary. Wasn't this one then. It was my Connemara marble one. Here it is. Had this one on the bed by me. And actually, I was sleeping in my son's room in his twin bed, because I was working on the main bedroom, the big bedroom. And I just, though in my mind, I held my arm out with the rosary in it. That instinct came to me to use the rosary on that in my mind and hold my arm out with it, just visualizing my doing that. And boom, went away. I could move again. But it was creepy. I mean, in the morning, I called my spiritual father and, he said, well, you did the right thing. He says, but, don't. He says, remember John Vianney, St. John Vianney. Okay. Just roll over. Well, I couldn't roll over that time. He said, you just got to laugh it off. And John Vianney would. I did have flames across my knees one time, too. I woke up and my bed was on fire at the knees, a wall of flames. And that time I just used the rosary and it went away. The devil cannot stand the Virgin Mary. The Virgin Mary is one ultimately that in Revelation squishes the devil with her foot, kills evil. Gets rid of evil with her heel, steps on the snake with her heel. And in the end times, the woman clothed in the sun will rid the evil out forever and ever. In the meantime, we must deal with it. And those are the fantastical things that happen. There would be words, I would hear words at night or different things, shock elements. But those were the more visual and physical things that were out of the ordinary. But on the island, there were all kinds of things that would go wrong. And I just had to keep going. Once I did get the house blessed, I did the thing with Jesus on all the windows myself, and that helped. But once that Russian Orthodox hermit monk priest came, and he had his prayer book, his exorcism book, and house blessing book, and he went room to room and thoroughly doused everything, and he meant business, and he was business. That priest, Father Paul, and he was very holy, and I was glad that the abbot didn't come, because the abbot was out in the world a lot for being a hermit, very out in the world, and he Father Paul had invited me to come to Mass there, and the abbot didn't want me there, so he was not in favor of me. But other people from the island could go there, and because I'm I'm feisty. I even asked him. I said, well, why can other people go? Well, we know them better. So, don't want you coming. You can't come. We don't want it just become filled with people from the outside. But I think he sort of resented that Father Paul and I had made an alliance. We made a connection, a spiritual connection. But that's because Father Paul was very spiritual. And his house blessing was the most powerful house blessing I've ever had in any house. I've had many houses blessed as I've moved along. And so if you're going to get your house blessed, it can be any priest, but if you have a choice, get one that you really respect, who's really into it, into his priesthood, and has great faith. You'll never regret that blessing. So everything turned from there, and I started not having as many accidents. I nearly died, I think, 3 times on that island, 3 or 4. One time was the head injury, flying off the stairs, which I still think part of that was, I think that woman pushed me. I don't know, wanted me to stay longer, and I had to stay longer then because I had to heal up so I could finish and redo the stairs. But I nearly fell off the pole barn roof when I was painting it. My angel stopped me within 2 inches of the edge twice. Because a foot got on just a little drip of paint and slid. Frontwards, backwards splits. I had never done the normal splits. Yeah, that hurt. And then to see me, I was sliding front ways down. It was going to be head first over the edge of this big pole barn. And by the grace of God, stopped 2 inches from the edge. Just stopped. I don't know how. Because I was on a slide. It was metal roof. And then, so that twice. Oh, I got a plant splinter in my thumb and didn't realize I wasn't familiar with what sepsis looked like. Sepsis poison, the red streak and stuff. It was so faint. Oh, if it's faint, it still is. So I drove myself over. Finally, I took a picture of it, sent it to a friend who has a daughter who's a nurse in another state. And 3 states were involved in these photos being sent with their little phones. And Carrie says, get to ER immediately. You've got poisoning. And Mercy, what do you have there, honey? No, bring that to me. Bring it to me, honey. Good girl, good girl. Drop it. Drop it. That's a good girl. Not for you to chew up. So that was another time I finally got there, and I was getting delirious by the time I got to the ER on the mainland. And they got me in right away because I wasn't in a good way. And they just happened to have a hand surgeon there. He was just finished with something else. And he told me, that I had a narrow escape and he was going to keep me in overnight. But no, I was okay. I made it. So that was a close call. And I don't know what else, but anyway, I had very, very bad strep. Very bad strep. And a policeman on the island. We had one police officer. And he came and got me antibiotics. He came and got them for me because I was alone on this farmhouse. And he was a Catholic deputy. And he left then. He left the island, but I had help from him at first. And then he left the island with his family. And then I had more bad things happen. But eventually I got through and got off the island. But everything changed in the farmhouse. And my help, I didn't have any more awful things happen after it got blessed. And but like I say, it can be just everyday kinds of stuff. Things like the neighbor man. exposing himself. That that not good in that situation. But I haven't had trouble since I put my St. Benedict medals in the four corners and did the prayers. And this guy's been okay. He hasn't done any dumb stuff since then. Because I'm protected here. I'm protected. But don't ever be naive either. Even with the blessings and all, just keep at your spiritual life. Keep with the spiritual life. Keep praying for other people. You don't need an exorcist. You might someday in your life. I don't know. I never have. But pray, pray, pray. Bible, scriptures, rosary. Rosary is a weapon against the devil. And the Virgin Mary. Consecrate yourself to the Virgin Mary. Do the 40-day devotion and consecration to the Virgin Mary. There'll be one coming up on March 25th. You start at 40 days before then. March 25th is the Annunciation. The Feast of the Annunciation. That's the next one coming up. The last one was the Feast of the Immaculate Conception on 8th of December. It would have ended those 40 days. So, and there's a little booklet that'll tell you just what to pray and what to say. I've done it. I've done it 2 or 3 times. And I found in my journals my old name for Mary. How could I forget Amma? I called her my Amma, A-M-M-A, because I'd had another experience of her I'd forgotten about. So, how my mind, there's just so many things that have happened in life. That's what the devil can do too. Just have your mind be so full of so many things that you forget these graces. So don't. See, I'm realizing this stuff, and it's not like I'm living my life that the devil's around every corner, but the devil is. The devil exists. As God exists, as angels exist, as Jesus and Holy Spirit and Mary and all the wonderful souls in heaven exist and are all around us when we think of them or call upon them, and the Trinity dwells within us. The devil doesn't dwell within us, but the devil's around, waiting for any opportunity of weakness on our part. And not to be afraid. John Vianney, this great saint, St. John Vianney, I think he had the best way of dealing. He got to the point he got used to the devil. The devil would move his bed back and forth across the room at night. John Vianney would be in the confessional like 17 or 18 hours, got very little sleep as it was. And even that sleep, the devil would try to ruin, because John Vianney was bringing many souls back to God. Many souls would come to this town in France, in northeastern France, Ars. And he was the priest there, the curé de Ars, late 1700s. And even John Vianney was considered dull by his bishop, not very bright, but he made it through seminary. The problem was he had never been educated. He didn't know how to read. But he wanted to be a priest. He had a calling. And they finally let him go into seminary, and he was the worst student because he hadn't been taught. So they had him go take classes with little children to learn to read. And he was humble, and he did it. He didn't mind. He so wanted to be a priest, it didn't matter. So, and he was very holy. He had great faith. But the bishop sent him to this little place that no one even bothered going to church there. It was so defunct. And he thought, well, he won't do too much harm there. It became a Mecca. It became crossing the different religions there. People came there from all over France and then from all over the world, if they could travel, even from the United States, but mostly from all of Europe. They would heard about this miraculous priest who could read minds and souls and knew the future for them and the past, and sort of like Padre Pio. But he did not have the exterior stigmata. The cure of Ars did not. Um, and cure just means pastor or rector, priest, another name. So John Vianney, though, was attacked by the devil a lot. And the closer you get to God, the more spiritual you become and away from the temporal, the more. But the devil was even after me when I was becoming Catholic, because didn't want me to, and didn't want me to find this great treasure chest in the history, the church that Jesus founded back in the start of Christianity, start of AD. So, and then after I was Catholic, there was more interference. The more I was growing, having all these treasures that I was learning about. And then, again, when I left the more, I didn't leave the temple, but I moved into learning more spiritual, becoming spiritual, grasping the reality of the Trinity within me, and communicating with God more and living the faith, not just going through the temporal physiological motions of Mass, but existing and loving and becoming one with the Mass and one with God and the Holy Spirit and Jesus. Then came another onslaught of demonic. And probably if I would think of it, like right now, I realize since I've been doing these videos, I've been having it worse with this one daughter, the one daughter I had left. It's been touch and go. So, cause and effect. Can't let it get to that. Makes me more strong to understand why. So the more the devil tries to upset your life in some niggling, even a little teeny way, press on the holy narrow pathway. Pour it on all the more. That's the best way. Just blow off, evil one. I'm going to go even more to God. In fact, I used to, when I would realize, oh, the devil's messing with me, I would say, thank you, devil, because I realize it's you, and I'm turning all the more to God now. So thank you. Thank you for messing with me. It's reminding me more Jesus, more God, more Holy Spirit, more Mary, more love, more scripture, more prayer. So, push on. John Vianney would just laugh and go back to sleep, and he had a nickname, Grappler. Oh, it's just you, old Grappler. And he learned just to sleep through the fire. He'd have his bed on fire. He'd sleep through his bed being shaken, physically shaken, moved from one side of the room to the other. And people would even witness the devil attacking John Vianney. And you know what it did? It caused his parishioners to have more faith then. But we need to know that there is evil, and why the evil is there, and what the evil doesn't like, and don't be bothered by it. The evil does not like us being good. And if you aren't having much interference, do a self-examination. Maybe you're not pushing enough on down the holy narrow pathway. Maybe you've stayed in one spot in your spiritual life. Maybe you haven't done any spiritual reading, or you aren't praying that much. I think I'm going to do some kind of a another consecration to Mary. I'm going to make up something. I think I have this book, a book on Mary. That will be part of my consecration. I've done it with the rosary 3 times, 3 different times in my Catholic life. So I'll do something different. That I'll learn something new about Mary and more about Mary historically and spiritually and scripturally. So that will be good. And a daily, but I think I'll do it 40 days and conclude on the Feast of the Annunciation on March 25th. So I'm going to have to look up when my start date would be. And if I miss a day for some reason, fall asleep before I get something done, should do it first off though. But if I don't, then I'll just do 2 in a day. So when you do these things, it's not, don't beat yourself up or quit if you get off schedule, in other words. Do your best. Just do your best. But try to do it first off if you have something that's a daily thing. That just makes common sense, so that you don't end up being too tired or something interferes. You have something happen and then you don't, and you get behind. And if it's important to us, we should do it first. We should do it first. So, okay, well, that's some of the devil. There's more to it, a lot more to it, and I'll have to find my papers on it. But God bless his real presence in us, and love God, love God.